Hello and thank you for joining me today. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time on this channel, we're an art channel. We meet every Monday and Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I do a variety of tutorials and demonstrations in all sorts of media. But today we're going to be doing ink and wash, and I'm using a Daler Rowney acrylic ink, and it's a black one. And I'm using it with a dip pen. Now this dip pen, as you can probably tell by the state of it, I've had it for years, so I do change the nibs occasionally, but the pen itself I've had for a very long time, and so you can tell it's absolutely caked in ink. So I do wash it out. When I finish using it, I wash it in a jar of water and keep my nib nice and clean, and clean off any dust from your nib as well before you start. Make sure there's nothing on there. So you can buy all sorts of different size nibs. This is just a basic general writing size really, nothing special about it at all. I bought quite a lot of nibs off eBay. I think someone was maybe having a clear out, and I managed to get a box full of nibs that I've still got and that I still use. Okay, so I'm starting off on it. This is a hot pressed watercolor paper, and it's £140. So the thing about that with the nib of your pen on the hot pressed paper is it runs really smoothly. So if you have a rough cold pressed paper or a rough paper, your nib will bounce around on the paper and perhaps even tear the paper where you've got texture there. So it's best to, when you're doing a detailed drawing with a pen, to use a nice smooth flat paper. So I'm just drawing this little bridge, and just a rough outline of it, and I'm not putting too much detail in, but I'm also not going right to the edge of the paper. So when you're doing a little sketch like this, a little ink and wash, it's nice in watercolor to leave the white of the paper, use the transparency of the paint and allow the paper to shine through, because it's a lovely brilliant white paper. So you get that nice fresh feel if you keep the transparency in your watercolors and don't cover every inch of white paper. And I think that's quite nice, not to go right up to the edge of your paper, just do sort of a bit of a motif really in the center, a vignette type of thing really, and don't just copy absolutely everything that's in your reference photo or your sketch that you're doing. Just pick out the interesting points. So obviously the interesting point on this one was the little bridge itself, and the way that the light was coming through the bridge underneath and through the dappled light in the trees. So when you're working in acrylic ink, you'll notice right at the start of the video there, I wanted to show you that I've always got some tissue, some kitchen roll, and I've always got some water handy. And this is in case we make a mistake and a big blob of ink suddenly comes out onto your paper. If you've got the water and the tissue there ready and a brush, it's much easier to get that mopped up very quickly than if you have to rush off to get that. So always have them there ready. And you can, I haven't actually done it on here, but you can very occasionally get too much ink on your pen and it'll all come out in a big blob. Don't panic, just get a brush and suck it up as much as you can to begin with, and then maybe with a damp brush suck some more up whilst the acrylic ink is still wet. So when the acrylic ink's dry, you can safely paint over the top of it because it's permanent and light fast once it's dry. But always make sure that it is actually dry before you start doing your painting. So either go away and leave it for an hour while you have your lunch, or go over it with the hairdryer if you want, but make sure it is completely dry before you put your paint on the top of it. So with the detail of the bridge itself, I've just picked out one or two stone shapes rather than trying to draw every single stone. And we can get sort of an impression of the bridge both with the few lines of the pen, but also with the washes that we put on later. So you're doing a combination to build that form of the bridge. With your pen itself, vary the pressure so that you've got some very light lines and some darker, more solid lines, and occasionally allow your pen to run out of ink as well, and then you get some more sketchy lines, and that all gives a bit of variety and contrast in your line, in your little sketch, and it'll make it much more interesting to look at. So where you've got shadows, very dark shadows, obviously where you're in the middle of a woodland and a riverbank scene like this, you're going to have some very dark shadows underneath the foliage, underneath the banking and the reflections underneath the water, etc. So just put some extra pressure on your pen and allow the ink to flow off more and get some nice dark areas, and so that they're already there before you even come to do any painting, because we're not really painting as such, we're just adding a little touch of colour with a few washes. Now if you look at the leaf shapes and the grass shapes and the things that I'm drawing, they're not really well observed. They're just, you know, an impression of what those leaf shapes will be, and the way that they're hanging down across the bridge, the way that they're hanging down towards the water. It's more about the shapes and the feel, and are getting an impression than actually doing a botanical study, because from a distance you're not going to see the actual shape of the leaf. You just need to give that rough impression that, you know, that's a nice big tree that we've got in the front there. Okay, so there could be any sort of trees and things that you're drawing, because from a distance we don't see every last little blade of grass and weed, etc. So just do a variety of lines. So again, this comes back to getting lots of variety, different angles, change the direction of your pen. I'm leaving this video completely in real time. You'll know if you're a regular visitor to my channel that I often speed up my videos just to save you getting bored, really. But with this one, I've left it in real time so you can see the whole process and how long it takes me to do something like this, and the way that I move my pen around quite a lot, so I'm not just always got it in the same direction and the same angle, and that again gives you a variety of line and makes a much more interesting picture. And the way I build up the line and do some shading and leave some areas completely blank as well, like the tree, because the tree was very smooth. I didn't do too much work on that at all. I just wanted to bring it into the foreground in front of the bridge. So the original photograph, it had lots and lots of detail on, but I've just picked out this tree shape and the shape of the bridge and where the river comes underneath it from this photograph that I found on Pixabay. So when it comes to the colour, today I've been using the Sennelier travel set that I bought quite a while ago. If you didn't see me reviewing that Sennelier paint set, the watercolour paint set, I'll pop a link to that in the description. But the one thing about it is the colours in the Sennelier seem to be very, very bright, so I'm actually getting into using them quite a bit more. And you know, the lemon that comes with it, you can really get a zing of colour in and some light in and make it feel like it's really midsummer, so that's a nice thing about it. So I really like those Sennelier paints, so that's why I chose to use them today, because we're just using a few colours. There was no need to have lots and lots of colours. You've got the detail in the drawing, you're just adding the paint for, you know, to make it a little bit more interesting and to get a nice feel for the time of day and the time of year, etc. So really this is the thing with ink and wash. Lots of people ask me all the time about how to restrict your colours and how many colours we should put on something like this. We're not really doing a painting, we're doing an ink and wash sketch. Like I said before, the idea is that your paper shines through, that you keep the transparency, and you'll see when I put the paint on, I'm not painting in the leaves, I'm not really even painting in the tree and the bridge that much. If you see, it's quite loose when I come to do it. I use a sable brush, and I just use the one brush, but keeping it very loose, so I'm just adding colour. I'm not actually painting the individual items, I'm not painting the individual leaves in. You can, there's nothing wrong with that, but for the feel of the ink and wash sketch, that's what we're sort of going for, and that's what people ask me about a lot, is how to keep it nice and loose and keep it simple on top of your ink drawing. So the colours that I was using in the Sennelier, I set off with yellow ochre, put that across the bridge and underneath the river, on the tree and all sorts, really, because that's a colour that's very natural and that's going to be in the background there. When you think about your river, you've got all sorts going on. You've got reflections, you've got the depth of the water, so you've got reflections from the bottom of the river as well as the light on top of the river and the reflections of the leaves and the objects around as well. So you could make that incredibly detailed and complicated, but we tried to keep it simple. Okay, so the yellow ochre was the first colour I used. I didn't allow that to dry. I made sure that I made these colours up in advance and that all the colours were of a similar concentration, so that we didn't have lots of cauliflowers and things going wrong. You need to keep your paints all a similar concentration when you're adding them onto the paper, wet into wet. So we allowed the next colour, the phthalo green, to mix with that yellow ochre on the page. But the phthalo green, it wasn't just on its own. I added a little bit of the French vermilion to it, just to take the edge off that green. I talked about this the other day when I talked about mixing greens, was if you pop a little bit of red in, it makes a nice natural colour. And the second green that I used was the forest green, also with the French vermilion added. When you add a little bit of red to your green, make sure it is a little bit. It's just a tiny touch that you need, because red's much more powerful. The darker colours underneath the tree and the shadows and things was a warm sepia with the ultramarine deep. And the last colour that I used, that I put on right at the end, was the lemon yellow, and this is the one I talked about earlier that I really like. It's such a sunny, lovely, bright colour. And we have phases of using different colours that we like. And sometimes we go for a more subdued look, but today I wanted this nice bright sunny look. It's actually another nice day here. We've had a super summer. It's been we've had the heat wave earlier on in the summer, and it's continued to be nice and warm. We've had some rain, but today it's very sunny and lovely day. So yeah, so that's about everything really. Make sure those paints are the same concentration. Allow them to touch each other and mingle into each other. Don't overthink it and do too much actual painting. Keep the light in. You'll see that I used a tissue to take the light out of the water again, where I'd got it a little bit dark because the light's coming underneath the bridge. Now this is a picture that you could do a little study like this, and then you could go on and do it in oil or acrylic in a lot more detail. And because you've done it once in the watercolour and the pen, you'll have a feel for the subject already, and you'll probably make a better fist of doing your actual finished painting than you would have done if you'd just gone into it straight off. I'll often do the same image quite a few times. Again, this is quite a personal thing. Some people don't like to do that, but I do feel you get very familiar with the subject, and you'll find that you get better and better, because each time you look at it you see more detail, and you'll see something that you've missed. So it's good to come back. Now the main thing about using a dip pen compared to the ordinary pens that I quite often use, you'll see that I use the Faber-Castell Pitt pens quite a lot when I'm sketching and things like that. The reason I really like using a dip pen, and that I use a dip pen a lot in my own work, is because you get much more variety of line. And again, this comes back to what I talked about earlier. If you get contrast in your paintings, and that can be contrast between light and shade, contrast in your colours between those that are on the opposite side of the colour wheel, but also contrast in the shapes and the lines themselves, how heavy they are, whether they're straight, whether they're curved. Get some, some nice straight lines in there, some curved lines, some broken lines, and some dogleg lines. Just have lots and lots of variety, and that's going to make a much more interesting picture than when you use a pen with a nib like the Faber-Castell Pitt pen that I use normally. All the lines are very similar. They're all the same width, they're all the same. Using the dip pen, you just make sure that you're always changing the pressure on your pen. Allow it to come off the paper and make a very light line, and then go heavier again. Allow it to run out of ink. So I think that's nearly everything. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to tell you. Obviously, if you've got any questions about working with a dip pen, or doing ink and wash, or ink and watercolour. Some people say ink and wash, some people say ink and watercolour, or line and wash, don't we? If you want to pop your questions in the comments below, as always, I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. I do apologise to people if I don't reply to your comments immediately. I do find that as my channel's growing, I'm getting more and more comments, and it does take time to catch up with them all. So what I tend to do is answer quite a few at once, maybe in the morning first thing when I get up or something like that. So I don't necessarily answer straight away, but I will always read them and get back to you when I can. You may have noticed I'm now approaching 3,000 subscribers, and I really would like to say thank you to everybody who's subscribed to me over the recent weeks. It's gone quite quickly up. I'm quite surprised, but I'm very thankful to you. That's lovely that you're enjoying watching my channel. If there's anything you'd like me to alter, anything you'd like me to do more of, if you want to put that in the comments below. It's always good to hear what you like. If there's any tutorials that you really want, that you really think you will find useful, anything that you want me to review, if I've got it, I'll do that as well. So just let me know in the comments, and I'll try and do that as soon as possible. But also, if you haven't subscribed and you would like to see more videos like this, you can subscribe below. And don't forget, there's a little bell there. You need to press that to get the notifications about when my new videos are out. But of course, you can always go onto my channel and look at the playlists there, because I try and split the playlists up into different media, which you know, some people like watching the watercolour ones, but they may not want to watch oil or something else. So if you just go onto the playlist, it'll just be more what you want to see yourself. Okay, so I think that's everything, and we'll leave it there, and I'll be back again soon with another video. Thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.